additional temporary housing space. And so the presentation this morning will provide an update on our immediate homeless assistance plan, which will include existing efforts such as our white flag and our hotel assistance for families that we already currently provide, as well as 2 additional pilot projects being presented to you this morning for your consideration that are also intended to provide interim housing as those permanent supportive housing units are being finalized. So the first slide that you see before you, the Pallet Shelter, which is what we have coined the Doorway Project. This concept creates a rapid emergency pop-up shelter community for persons that are experiencing homelessness. It also allows us to provide temporary housing from a disaster should that need arise. This project would serve a means to provide immediate housing for people experiencing homelessness while we await completion of those permanent supportive housing units, or it allows us to provide those temporary housing solutions during the interim when shelter beds are full. This method we have found to be more cost effective than hotel usage. It's easier to monitor as it's structured as a campus. And it also provides an opportunity for targeted case management on site, which we fully intend with your support today moving forward with to do a request for proposals for interested organizations that can assist with those efforts. Our goal through this particular project is to purchase and create a 40-unit village, which will, when assembled, will allow us to support up to 80 individuals that are awaiting permanent housing. Our priority initially would be to be for people experiencing chronic homelessness. However, we do acknowledge that there is a need for resources for families with children. And so we will also take that into consideration as well. We will utilize for the intake process, the homeless management information system for each individual. And we will use that to collect appropriate data for each person in order to coordinate the additional services that are needed. Next slide. It's on the roll. Sorry about that. The second proposal for you is what's called the Safe Parking Program. And the purpose of this is we know in working with our chronic homelessness population that the loss of vehicle is one of the final steps of chronic homelessness. And so this program will provide safety and case management for individuals that are living in their shelter, in the vehicles. Safe parking will be available to individuals who are sleeping in and or living in vehicles in a designated secure location. Naturally, there will be some eligibility criteria that individuals must meet. For example, they must have a vehicle, they must be homeless, they must be living in their vehicles. They will have to have a desire to move back into permanent supportive housing and participate in programming to increase the stability for the services that we offer. Currently, we are looking at and anticipating a maximum of 35 vehicles in these locations. There are set operating hours, but this is a pilot program that we are proposing to serve as an immediate and a long-term resource. And again, as I mentioned, similar to the Doorway Project, we will continue to use the HMIS system and that data for the intake of each individual. Families who are identified with minor children will be referred after their first night of safe parking to a hotel stay option if shelter beds are not available. As I mentioned, we will continue to move forward with the implementation of some of our existing white flag and winter emergency shelter plans that we currently have in place. The items that you see before you again are the hotel assistance that we will continue to provide for families. We will also move forward with activating the Regency Inn for our winter shelter program, which is for persons that are experiencing homelessness from the November through March winter season. Security will continue to be provided on site. We also will continue to provide assistance to families through separate scattered site hotel assistance, which we already provide through partnerships with several of our providers. And we will continue to do that through the upcoming winter season. We also will activate our white flag shelter, which we have done so for several years. This will allow us to continue to provide support for during those winter months to serve some of those individuals that need warming facilities where no beds are provided. And again, the goal of this is to help to transition those individuals into more permanent housing options during these months. And so as individuals transition out, other individuals will be able to fill empty bed space space. And again, while the Regency is primarily targeted to those individuals with mobility needs, persons with disabilities, and those who are elderly, with the proposal of the safe parking and for the doorway project program, we will continue to try to make sure that we do what we can to support our families with children. So one of the main points of considerations that we will also wanted to share with you this morning is for locations. Our team has done a job of identifying and making consideration for areas where the majority of those experiencing homelessness do have families. They do have natural support systems. So it is important for us to design these programs that will support those individuals that do not displace them from their community of origin or from the natural support systems that they currently have. We also like to take into account the consideration for locations that are in proximity to the service providers, and as well as taking into consideration the transit time that it takes, as well as the walkability to accessing these services, to ensure that we do not create barriers for individuals that need help the most. And so the next slide will show the current overview of general areas where we have found that people experiencing homelessness access their services. And so in determining these locations, those factors that I just mentioned were made as we look at the points of frequency where homelessness occurred, where those services are accessed, as well as where we will anticipate the most impact for these two programs. So at this point, I will pause. If there are any specific questions that you may have, I'm happy to answer those questions. And also our team from the Housing and Neighborhood Development is available as well.
Nasha, I don't know if you mentioned, if you did, I didn't hear it. I don't think you mentioned heat. I know that I spoke with the city manager. He said they will. It is on. They will be heated, but if you could just.
Well, they're going to be heated a certain number of degrees above the outside temperature is what I read.
Yes, so each pallet unit, which Mayor, I believe that's what you were referring to, it does utilize a 1,500 watt heater installation system. Each unit does come equipped with air conditioning. It does come with heat. There is ventilation for circulation. It is pest proof. It is mold resistant, mildew resistant as well. And so it does have some standard installation. I believe the R2 standard is still installation. This is getting way too technical, but it does allow for a more comfortable living sheltering arrangement. There are some options as well for us to expand that. I know that there is opportunities for communal spaces. The shelters do allow you to have a 400 to 800 square foot community room. And so if there are gathering spaces, because again, the shelters are designed to be sort of like a village type of a scenario where it does create that sense of community, and we can provide those support services as well. There will also be restrooms. And so for each pallet shelter, or for up to 20 pallet shelters, there are 2 sinks, 2 toilets, and 2 showers that are also provided. And that's best practices per the company's standards. And so those will also be provided as well. The utility aspect of it will allow us to connect in and provide temporary electrical, water, sewer connections to power, but the units also have the ability to be solar powered or generator powered as well.
It would be good if we could reach out to Procter and Gamble and see if they could do the Tide Loads of Help, Tide Loads of Hope, where they brought in temporary laundry facilities, that maybe they could partner with us and do it on a regular basis.
That's an excellent idea. Thank you,
Some
sir.
questions, please.
Well, so I think it was Nancy, then Sharon, Tammy, Goldie.
I just have 3 questions, I think, which should be easily answered. But I'm interested in. Sorry, I have 3 questions. What's the longevity or the life of these pop-up shelters, Michelle or Doctor?
So they typically have about a 10-year lifespan.
Okay.
And the R factor, the insulation factor, is based on the climate of the area in which you live. So we have the insulation based on the climate of North Carolina, central North Carolina.
Great. I just question the families or individuals who will be sleeping or parking overnight. you know, what does one do at 6 o'clock in the morning? So I just have a
Yeah.
question about that. And then my other question is, are bathroom facilities also available to those people who are in their automobiles?
Yes, ma'am. We have a plan for that to be on site for the safe parking location as well. And what we know typically is with most folks who still have access to their vehicle, they typically are working temp jobs or some kind of job during the day. So that population, statistically speaking, is out doing something during the
Right.
day like that. So
So 6 o'clock is not considered too early.
well, and that can be, the hours of it can be changed. That was a general marker to hold that time.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
I believe next is Sharon, then Tammy.
Yeah, so, yeah, piggybacking on what Nancy was saying, Mr. City Manager. I was concerned about 6 a.m. being relatively early, particularly when you're talking about children. That time of morning, having some type of access to get them ready, prepared for school. Be able to be hygienically clean for, being able to encounter in that environment. So I'd like to see that time frame expanded, because you're saying 6 a.m. and what happens if they're there beyond 6? Because I've read where they may be security on site. I don't want it to be such a thing as, okay, it's 6 o'clock, you're not gone. And that becomes a problem. So I'd like to see that time expanded. Certainly, at least to allow some levity there. So I'd like for that to be at least till 7 a.m. or for daylight, because as we know, it gets dark and stays dark for quite a while in the morning. But my other question is, with the safe driving locations of people being in their cars, you've got the Regency, where is it going to be white flag this year as well? And my understanding, what I was reading, is that it would house 50, and then these pallets would do 40. So that's 90 individuals. Can some of this not be split for families to have some access to?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, we can. We can
Councilwo-
split those between families and individuals.
And Councilwoman Hightower, to your point, families do have specific needs. Children have specific needs that individual adults don't have. The goal of all of this is for families not to be in the safe parking or in the pallet shelters, but instead for families to be housed through a motel option, so that they can be there if those kids have a more regular setting in order to get ready for school. It's easier to coordinate with Guilford County Schools if they're in a hotel location, if they need transportation or things like that to get them to their home school. So the goal with families is to not have them access either of these, but rather have them run through an existing program that places families in hotel stays.
Right, and that's probably logically down the line, but I'm just thinking that, they already know there's a car they go to. If they got more than one child, two or three children cramped in a vehicle, this would allow them a little bit of room to spread out, do homework, those types of things if they're in that position. So I'm wondering, again, like I say, if some of these units cannot be used to at least provide the community spaces that we're just talking about, providing that community environment.
Yeah,
Amongst them.
they certainly can. And the hotel shelter option for families is already in place and has been in place through funding that Greensboro Urban Ministry already has allocated for that purpose. So we're already able to move those families into hotel stays. So there's not a delay in getting them there.
Which is good, speaking of urban ministry, I was a little concerned to see there was only urban ministry and IRC, because I've worked those two are not in the COC, and there are agencies in the COC that I am a part of that also offer shelter space, particularly for families. I know individuals, and we focus on that as well. However, the family piece of it is critically important, as I often hear Commissioner Kay Cashin speak about when we meet within the body of our city county meetings. So I know that would be a great concern for her as well. So I would like for us to be more inclusive with those partners and working with them, because they offer some experiences along those lines as well. And I've worked with many of them that have put families in hotels as well, not only just urban ministry. And urban ministry uses churches, because I've gone to the church that has paid the hotel and picked the check up and taken it to the hotel. So I'm familiar with that. But I do know in the body of the COC, there are certain agencies that are designed specifically, have the case managers, social workers there, have the experience there, and deal with families on a consistent basis. And some families are chronically homeless, as
Yes,
you
ma'am.
know. And so,
And Councilwoman Hightower, just to address what you just brought up, the IRC has indicated because they are already funded to do White Flag, that's the piece that's already there for them. And the
right,
hotel program that already exists with Greensboro Urban Ministry. But for the remainder of these programs, our intention is to run an RFP process to identify providers.
okay, yeah, because I'd like to see that be an inclusive process.
Yes, ma'am.
As with the agencies that are out there doing the work, and having those other connections as well, so.
If I can also jump
thank-
in, Councilwoman Hightower. So next week, October 18, we're bringing some proposals to you that will include contracts with some members of COC.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm glad to see that's coming forth too as well, because they need that money to do the work, because some of them don't have the money to float. So, but as I was looking at it yesterday, and the third thing is the locations of this, as I'm looking at the map. As I read that a lot of the homeless are concentrated in districts 1 and 2. And so how are you making that determination of actual locations? Not the safe driving piece, because I know that's a private issue and we want to keep them safe. But for the other pieces of it, because when people start to see pallets popping up, they're going to get concerned. So have you identified neighborhoods? Have you and I know this is new today, and I appreciate you all bringing forth an immediate solution, because as you take people's stuff away downtown, they need somewhere to land. Absolutely. They do. But how have you identified those locations?
I think primarily for us is making sure that we don't impose an extra burden on people who are already experiencing homelessness by taking them far away from their natural support system. And so we want to make sure that the locations are not only close enough to where people have family or friends or some support of a kind, but also close enough to transit services within a walking distance of a bus system, and also social services that are close enough to them. In fact, if you see the map in front of you, that's why we have, I don't remember what those radius, what the
Those are 1 mile
Okay.
radius markers around kind of some of the primary points of service for people experiencing homelessness. And we chose those because really everything else kind of falls into that radius: Family Services of Piedmont, other organizations that are providing services. And you'll see it kind of creates a corridor of where the services are located. And to answer your question, Councilwoman Hightower, we are looking at everything that is available to us for potential location that would serve folks to the highest degree that we can, and meet those needs. So we're actively doing those assessments right now. And if Nasha wanted to add anything.
Having said that, however, I know that outreach is also going to be critical, and we need to really be able to engage those who are going to be living near these locations. So we will definitely make sure that that engagement takes place.
Yeah, because that's the only other thing. I think this is great to immediately start addressing it, but we still don't have homeless in the room and homeless at the table to see what their needs are. We are still leaving out the critically important element of all this discussion, and that is the folk that we say we're trying to help. Exactly.
And Councilwoman Hightower, we are in the process of completing a survey among people experiencing homelessness in Greensboro, asking these and other specific questions. So we've gotten some of that feedback back. Some of this has been driven by service providers and council members and others talking about what we know is the immediate need, that need for immediate shelter, a place to park a car where you're not going to get a ticket or have an issue. But you're exactly right. Engagement with people with lived experience is critical in this, and it's a high priority for us.
Right, and yeah, and again, I go back to the COC. I can't help it because there are people in that COC, continuum of care, that experience, have the expertise and have been working with them for years. And you know, we have to have a collaborative effort here to attack this problem if we're looking for solutions that are sustainable and long-term.
And we
solutions.
absolutely hope those agencies will apply for the case management portions of this. Having case management on site for each of these services is critically important so that we're going out to the people that need us instead of expecting them to find help wherever they can. So certainly hope that that everyone who's applicable will apply for that so that we get the best service provider possible.
All right, thank you. And I'll let somebody else ask questions, but yeah, I do have a lot of questions and I'm concerned about the resources. That's why that community room would be important. It would house social workers, case management, even school guidance counselors could meet those individuals there. And that would be very important. Thank you.
Supposed to say something? Yeah.
My question is, are these 40 units going to be made into like a village?
So typically across the country, the way that they're put together, they're spaced between 6 and 15 feet apart between each unit. But the idea is that you place them close together because again, this is a temporary solution. This is not where people are going to stay forever. This is an interim step. So statistically speaking, what we've found as we've spoken to providers in other areas of the country is it's typically about a quarter of an acre that's needed for 40 units to space them out. That's about the size, just to give you an idea.
All right, my other question, how many citizens do we have on the streets every day?
So that's a
On the
loaded
street.
question, right? Unfortunately, and I think everyone would agree to this, we've had multiple conversations with the county that Councilwoman Hightower and the mayor have been in. We do not have a great data set through our HMIS system that gives us good enough answers. So what you're left with is kind of trying to pull together data from things like day centers, from things like shelter providers. The best guess that we have is that we have an immediate need for about 250 units. The combination of all these programs would allow us to accommodate between 200 and 250 individuals. And these are really the toughest folks to serve, right? We know the number is much greater than that, but in terms of an immediate action step, ideally, this gets us a long way down the road with addressing those numbers.
Well, we hear complaints from citizens about folks in the park, folks in the library, folks who are just in the way during the day. Now, if we house them at night and say 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, they have to leave. What do they do? Where do they go?
So
They're just throwing them out in the street. So what? So is there, I heard somebody say something about a larger facility, like a gathering place.
yes,
It
ma'am.
needs to be, because everybody doesn't like the RC.
That's right. There's a possibility of purchasing, there's a 400 square foot community room. There's also an 800 square foot community room option that would be placed on site where the pallets are. So if folks wanted to go there, or if they wanted to stay inside their unit, they could do either of those things. To your point, and it's not a fault of shelters, it's the nature of the way they're designed. Shelters close in the morning and then folks are kind of let out onto the street. And that's exactly what you're talking about. So our goal is not to increase that, but rather to provide some options that would eliminate the need for folks to just kind of be out wherever they can go during the day. So they can stay through the doorway project. They can stay in their unit during the day with the exception of when they have appointments related to case management or advancing their housing needs. Or to your point, we could use one of the 400 or 800 foot
What?
community spaces.
You didn't include that in this proposal.
Yes, ma'am, we didn't.
You did
I-
for that unit.
I pulled the numbers on that this morning. He's sending me that over and we can send that over.
I think
following.
that's a necessary part of it, because I think where we're having all the concern is because the homeless are getting on folks' nerves. And so there are places, but where can they go? There is no place for them. You put them out in the day and they go to the library because it's warm. They go to the park because it's a gathering place. So we need to have a gathering place for them also.
Happy to include that in these numbers. I sent an email this morning after we spoke to get the numbers on the 400-foot unit and the 800-foot unit. His recommendation was to use the larger unit just to give folks more room to kind of spread out. And I should have those specs back shortly.
Okay. I think we need to consider that.
Is that for both sites?
For the safe parking, that really is a place to be at night so you don't get ticketed or you don't have something that comes up. There wouldn't be a community space in that location. And that is typically the way that safe parking locations have been run across the country. It is literally a place for you to park in the overnight hours.
But they got weekends too. It's not
Yep.
just homeless Monday to Friday.
No, absolutely.
So that they got weekends too. So that should be considered.
If that
on
is
both- for
something that,
both sites. I think it just is
if that is
necessary.
something that you all are interested in us including in that location, we can certainly do that as well.
I'd like to see the numbers.
Okay.
I know. Brought that up. I brought it up earlier.
Couple of questions. You talked about the bathroom facilities, et cetera, at the safe parking. Are you looking at procuring these pop-up units for that or some other solution?
Honestly, it depends on the location that's chosen for the safe parking program. It doesn't require nearly as much infrastructure as the doorway project does, because for the doorway project, you need water access, tap into the sewer, you need electrical and all of those pieces. Most likely for the safe parking location, we're looking at a more portable option, whether that be, you've seen them at festivals, the trucks that are there that have the ability to use that or something of that nature, but not something that's quite as, none of this is permanently affixed, but not something that requires quite as much tie-in as the doorway project location would.
And if you can help me remind me what the cost of just the bathroom pop-up is. Bathroom facility.
You have it in front of you. There you go.
105, 671.
For two sets of bathrooms.
And the reason I'm asking is we hear a desire for bathrooms and offering free accessible bathrooms throughout the day as well in the community. And I'm wondering if there's a place somewhere perhaps along the Greenway or something of that nature. I know people, just yesterday, there was an article in the paper about the need for bathroom facilities along the Greenway as well. I'm wondering if that could be a solution
Sure.
in addition.
The only real requirement to get the bathroom set up structured is you need to be able to have a sewer tie-in. So that's the key kind of takeaway from a kind of rough understanding. So really anywhere that you could do the sewer tie-in and have water access, theoretically you could use these. And we gave the example when we first were talking about these, for example, a tornado in East Greensboro.
Right.
These could have been deployed in a scenario like that fairly easily in a community where you had access points to do that. So the beauty of it is their mobility and their flexibility. So I would say that anywhere that was identified by you all that you wanted to investigate that, we're certainly happy to do it.
And Mr. City Manager, in terms of timing of being able, my understanding is there's roughly a 7-week lead time on these units to order. Is that expanded greatly?
So no, so and I'll say, Councilwoman Thurman, you know me well. When we started having the conversations with how quickly we could deploy these, I've become a permanent fixture with this company to make sure that we can expedite that time frame to get them here as quickly as possible so that they're in place before our winter needs are really pressing. And we anticipate that to still be the case.
And I assume that we could get whatever, once the site was located, identified, we could get the sewer working, the tie-ins for all that utilities prior to the units actually arriving so that it would just be a drop them in and we're
Yes.
ready to go.
Yes, and it's important to also point out that this is not a construction, but an assembly. And so construction obviously will require a different degree of process, permitting, and all of those things and preparation. This is assembling. And I also understand that they typically hire homeless people who have experienced homelessness and homeless people to actually, homeless neighbors to assemble this. So yes, we can start getting those in place before we receive those items for assemblage.
A member of our staff has been tasked with working through the infrastructure part of this so that all of that is in place. So it's basically plug and play once they show up.
One of my concerns and one of the reasons that I raised this issue I'm glad we're holding the meeting now instead of at the end of the month, is I'm very concerned that the availability of these units with the terrible destruction in Florida, that the availability and the pricing of these units may go up dramatically. And I think if council decides that this is a good option, for us, that we need to move sooner rather than later. And that's why I pushed for an earlier meeting.
And I would say, Councilwoman Thurman, that the manager's office has been tied in with Chris Payne, working with us from a procurement standpoint to make sure that we're moving this as quickly as we possibly can if this moves forward today.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So many times we as a council are told we have an issue, but you're not doing anything. I think this is the one time we need to do something immediately before we have people freezing on the sidewalks. I left a function last Thursday down in Center City Park, and it was about 8:30 when I left, and there were people putting pallets and sleeping bags down because they had nowhere to go. Is this the perfect solution? Probably not, because our goal is to get people into permanent housing with all of the services wrapped around them. However, when you have people who have the god awful position that they are in at that moment, being houseless and freezing on the streets. I mean, Michelle, the walk of remembrance, people who have absolutely been on the streets and had horrible things happen to them, whether by health, sickness, so many things. I do want to thank the city manager, and April brought this to us because while we want to see everyone in permanent housing, this is something where we cannot be told you didn't do anything. We want some kind of housing for people who are out on the streets now. Not next week, not next month. We want it as soon as we can get this. And I commend you, Michelle, for working so hard in trying to get all of this and all of the information to the city manager and to us. I don't see how we can turn this down. If anyone wants to continue seeing people sleep on the streets, you go right ahead and say so. But I'm not going to say so. I want to see people in a safe environment. This has security. I do agree with Ms. Hightower, and I think Dr. Wells mentioned, I'm worried about the time frame in the morning.
Sure.
Because that is really early.
Yeah.
I do know we're going to have to find a way to sustain this. It's not going to be, running on its own. I know an RFP will go out for case management, things like that. But to me, it's getting closer to my vision of the one-stop shop. You know how in tune I am with the Family Justice Center, the one-stop shop. So someone is living on the streets, cold at night, has no food. They will be directed to this area that will have those things for them, just the basic needs for survival. And then wrap around the resources that can get them out of that situation, whether they get into a project with an apartment, a tiny home, whatever it might be. But you've got to have some kind of something for an immediate need. So this, my friends, to me is an immediate need. And I have talked to homeless people on the streets. They do wish, most of them, at least the people I've spoken to, would like a safe place to go at night. And I think this would be the perfect solution. As we've all said, temporary. Keep that in mind, temporary.
It's a beginning.
It's a beginning instead of people looking at council and say, you're not doing anything. So let's sit here and do something. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I don't, we've had three people, we had Nasha present, Michelle present, Mr. Manager chiming in, so I don't know where I'm going with these. I actually sent a lot of these questions to the manager earlier. One of the things I'm going to go through them probably rapid fire just to be effective and efficient with everybody else's time. So Nasha, on this, is there only one vendor that builds these pallet homes?
Yes, Pallet Homes is proprietary, so this will be sole source. The reason that this is attractive, one, from a timing perspective, going with this one company that has the experience, they actually produce this from start through.
So nobody else
completion.
in America produces this.
That we are aware of that provides this specific product. That is correct.
Okay, so in looking at this, have we brought in TRC and the fire marshal? Because I've heard reference to tornadoes, East Greensboro tornado. We just had Hurricane Ian, that trees were falling on houses. There's a lot of cleanup. I have great concern over the safety of this. I'm curious about what TRC and the fire marshal would say, because I know our fire marshal is very by the book.
Yes, we've had some cursory conversations with our planning and zoning department as well as building inspections. They are rated and for wind load, to answer your question with regards to some of the environmental concerns. And I'll let Michelle chime in with some of the other specific details as far as the actual review and process that her team is engaged.
So Troy Powell with Housing and Neighborhood Development is doing the conversations with partners with other departments within the city to make sure that all of those things meet the standards that they should and are expected to meet. There is nothing within building code that creates us any significant issue. He's working, to your point, with the fire marshal, with everyone else. He is part of our safety review team that's run by Assistant City Manager Davis. And so that group of people are part of this conversation, and he's ensuring that we're meeting all the standards that we need to meet for these to be as safe as they can be for the people that reside within them.
So my thought process is, before the city would invest $780,000 in a 40-unit pallet village, that we need to have absolute clarification and substance behind our fire marshal and our technical review committee on this. Because to me, from a sustainability standpoint, in a large storm, a hailstorm, a snowstorm, we've got to have some backup before we go forward with this. Second of all, I don't think we've exhausted all our resources on how we can think about this. There are plenty of empty big box stores that have bathrooms, that have a lot of space, that I think we could utilize for a lot less money and house just as many, if not more people. So I think we should still continue to exhaust our resources. I don't think we have. And as I scoot past the doorway, so I want to get the safety compatibility for the doorway project. I'm not sold on that at this moment. I'm concerned about the safety of folks that might be in there. I gave the city manager about 9 questions relating to Regency Inn. I'll go back to the safe parking. So you're talking about safe parking. As I see it, I think, when Tammy brought up the cost, so the cost on case management and security is $184,800 for parking 35 cars. Up to. That does not include the bathroom cost, but if you include the bathroom costs as quoted above for the potential doorway project, you would cost an additional $105,671. So for the safe parking for 35 cars, you're talking about $290,471. Is that accurate?
That would be roughly accurate. Yes.
Are we thinking through that pretty good?
I think
Because
we
there's
are.
gotta be ways that we could be like, I get the safe parking aspect of what you're talking about. But if you broke it down, you could essentially put folks, instead of letting them stay in their car, in some type of residential unit for $1,500 a month. And they don't have to sleep in their car and they have a bathroom and the city saves money and they're in a better location.
Unfortunately, we don't have those housing units available to put those folks in. I agree with you. Any day of the week, I would rather put folks in units than say we have a place for you to sleep in your car. The reality of the current moment is we don't have those units available. We are in a moment where we have a large number of folks that have housing vouchers that would accommodate those units as well. And we can't identify housing units for those folks to move into. So that kind of ties back into this is an immediate kind of response as we work on some of those longer issues. But the issue around that really has to do with affordable housing access.
Well, I'm, as I mentioned before, I'm happy to work with you on that and fill that gap. On the access to services, the map that's up there. One of the city's biggest issues is looking at that map and I think somebody said they're a mile apart roughly. And this is a pretty singular linear map of services going from south to north, north to south. But as we've stated many times, West Wendover Avenue behind the ice rink has a significant population. East Greensboro has a significant population, and we have allowed ourselves from a city perspective to focus on a linear aspect going from roughly south downtown to just above North Greensboro on O. Henry. So having a better approach to a campus approach is the direction that everybody in America has gone that's had success. And Greensboro's, it's time for us. We've been having the same conversation since I was on previously. And for us not to have some of these answers going forward is not doing the community justice. We've got to get there and we've got to bring it all together.
So I certainly hear that. The issue, what you're talking about in terms of what you see in some locations in East Greensboro and on Wendover is certainly true. The absence is that none of those service locations are in either of those places. So what you find are people who are very disconnected from the services they need, which really just breeds the issue or causes the issue to get greater because they can't walk to services. They can't get to DSS. They can't get to a hospital easily. They can't get to service providers easily. And this map, just to clarify, is really about the location of service providers, where they are right now, and where we need to be looking to make sure that folks can access the things that they need. This is less about, encampments that may be in other locations. They're all over the city. That's the reality of tent encampments. But the
Yeah,
reality
I
of
understand all
services
that.
there.
I get it. And by the way, I've been, and the mayor can tell you, and Sharon, I think can tell you, I have been hammering the HMI system in our last task force meeting. You were in there, we sat beside each other. I've been hammering that to get it. Relating to the Regency, have we been paying a management fee to Partnership Homes to manage a building that's been sitting empty since April?
No,
Okay. Mr. Manager, you've got, I won't belabor this now because, but you've got 9 questions. I'm happy to share them with other council members. Trying to dive into what is the relationship there. It seems to me that the city invested $3,030,000 with a 0% interest on a property that had a purchase price of 2.75. So $300,000 in excess. We paid for the furniture. We paid for this. We gave them $100,000 development fee, which I don't understand what they really developed. We agreed to give them $660,000 in other expenses, which I don't understand. The development fee of $904,000, which is 6.6% of the total estimated cost. Hopefully, for sure, since we haven't had any development out there, none of that's been paid out, but I just love confirmation about that. It's very high on industry standard. Looking at it from, under section 1.9 of the management fees, it states in our contract that we should pay them $3,520 for managing the asset. It was interesting to me, the borrows administration fee of $3,000. I've never heard of that, and I've done probably 150 real estate deals. And under Article 6, events of default, how will a borrower default on a loan that doesn't have a monthly payment? Like, how does Partnership Homes default on our loan when we're not requiring them to pay us anything? It's kind of like, I wish I had that deal with my mortgage company. Right? So I want to understand some of these things as we dive in, because to me, the immediate impact would have been to house 40 to 80 people at Regency Inn since April. And so that's my significant frustration. And I don't see how we can support just spending another $1 million to buy something else when we're not taking care of what we own. So, you know, you've got those. You don't have to answer anything right now. I know the mayor wants to speak. But, you know, I hope that we can collectively come up with a lot better plans that are more permanent for our citizens.
I just have a couple of quick questions. So the people who are in the doorway houses, will they have to vacate during the day?
No.
Okay, so they can be there 24 hours. I know that when we look at emergency housing, it is what feel like 23 degrees. And that was set by the Army because that is a standard that the Army uses. You know, I would say that people in the Army are probably better outfitted than people in the community. And I think that we need to review that 23-degree threshold to something that is actually livable. People can freeze to death at 23 degrees. So if we could look at the white flag shelters and raising that to some humane temperature,
Yep.
I think that needs to be done this year. I know that it will cost us more, but I think that it is money well worth it. So if we could have some information on raising that threshold, I would like to see it within the next 2 weeks, if that is possible, because it is getting colder.
And I can tell you, Madam Mayor, that the service providers within the White Flag Shelter have long wanted to raise that threshold.
So I guess what we have to figure out is what, you know, based on previous temperatures, what that additional cost is and whether our service providers are able to help us with those additional days.
Happy to do that.
How many hotel rooms does the county provide?
I do not believe the county currently has a set aside specific number of hotel rooms. I can confirm that.
I would like to find out from the county on what they are spending. I know that they had money put aside for COVID hotel rooms. And of course, those were for a specific reason, but they had them in the budget. I'd like to see if maybe they could help us short term. I think one of the biggest problems that we have is getting an accurate point in time count. I don't believe we have had an accurate point in time count for many years. And granted, that point in time count is only good for that one day. People come and go. And I know that we are seeing more people, more new people in our community than we've ever seen. We have to make sure that we actually have a handle on how many people are living on the streets. And additionally, how many people, especially young children, are couch surfing at this point, because we know that without stable housing, their success at school, people's success at work is much lower. While I understand why we're talking about this, having a parking lot for people living in houses, it still makes me feel really uncomfortable. You know, I know that everybody on council knows that the long-term thing is to get them out of those cars.
That's right.
And into hotels and into permanent housing. While I see it as an immediate need, as a stopgap measure, but I think we have to do better than that. But I think it is good to address the need that we currently have. So I would say that this is something we need to move forward with. And I hope that in the next few weeks, we can gain some support from the county. And I know that Sharon and I and Zach being on that task force will certainly make that ask. And I think it's important, Sharon, to bring the COC up to date on the expenditures that we are outlaying on an emergency type basis. I think those were and then again, somebody had mentioned, maybe it was Tammy, about having bathroom facilities. I think that is important. We do have bathroom facilities downtown. We've
Right.
got them open at the parks, and they're open as long as the parks are open. We had actually for a short while had them open 24 hours a day, and they were significantly vandalized. And so now they are only open during park hours, but there are facilities downtown. But as we've always said, this is not just about downtown. We all know of encampments and other places throughout the town. So that's what I have at the moment, Hugh, and then we do have 3 speakers from the floor. Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to thank the city manager and staff for bringing this so quickly to our attention. Housing is a crisis. I think every council member has indicated that housing is a crisis in our community, as is across the state and the nation. The devil is in the details, obviously. This is the starting point. Everything from the identification, the eligibility, the term, those holistic services that are so important, safety and security. Ms. Kennedy, earlier you mentioned that this would be a temporary fix. How would you define temporary?
I would define this as something that would carry us through probably roughly the next 8 to 9 months as we finalize permanent supportive housing.
And we're currently looking at about 40 pallet homes, for instance, which would house 2 each. So that's about 80
Correct.
residents, not necessarily familial, but just
Correct.
80 residents. Something that I mentioned at the last council meeting was one of my, I'm not sure if the term would be concerns, but areas of heightened interest will be making sure that we do not concentrate or overly concentrate these communities in any one community. And I look at the map that was provided to us, and I know that it indicates service providers. But I do think that it's very important and very critical that since all of Greensboro is experiencing homelessness, that we look at not concentrating, but at locating and siting in as many areas throughout Greensboro as we possibly can, whether it's east, north, southwest, that all of Greensboro needs that opportunity to help with the homelessness issue. And then next is, and I think you indicated earlier that we have 200 plus homeless who have been identified, 200 plus residents.
Chronically homeless, we would.
Chronically homeless. And we're talking about 40 here. And, sometimes you have to go big or go home. I think this is the time to go big. We've talked about the issue. We can be happy about 40 pallet homes, but that leaves another 160 still in the same situation. Those are the chronically homeless. So I'm thinking that if we're going to do something, we need to do something big. 40 is a nice number, but it needs to be 80 or 120 or 160 or 200. Just go ahead and bite the bullet. Funding, we can find the funding for it. If you ask anyone in this community, you know that housing and homelessness is the top critical issue. And so therefore, we're going to have to find ways to put our money where our mouth is. And I think in this case, it's in this housing crisis and this homelessness issue. And it's one that we have to address throughout the entire city, not just in one particular corridor of the city. But I really appreciate the work and the effort that has gone into this. This is what we need. This is the conversation we need to have, but we need to have the whole conversation and not just a piece of it.
Thanks.
Sharon, and then let's hear from the speakers.
Yeah, finally, I just want to say that, I really am kind of disturbed that the county is not here. Because the county is important in this discussion. And I really think we should have had somebody here from the county as well, because as we deal with homelessness, as you say, Hugh, it is everybody. It's all across the city. It's all across the county as well. Because we sit in the county. And yes, we've been talking about it in some of the meetings, and we recognize that funding is an issue. And people are funding these things. Sometimes they're doing things out of their pockets as well. But I really wish the county was here to be part of this discussion, because there's nobody to answer the question about the hotel. You know, whether or not we can move these people quickly from a safe car location into some type of housing, and even if it is a hotel. And I think there's a partnership there that's totally missing. The hotel partnership is missing in order to be able to house these individuals, and here that would move that number down substantially because we're looking to house individuals. You know, car is something you do of necessity. It is because you do not want to be in the elements and on the street. You would much rather be at least in a hotel. When you talk about moving them, how quickly are you talking about moving them? And see, by me not seeing that partnership right now, I don't know how quickly that's going to happen, because I think we need to be able to have them here at the table of discussion so that we say, okay, this may be temporary for them to, in their car, to be here. But now that individual is given priority to be housed, to be going through rapid rehousing, even on the end as we look at their assessments to help them. And hotels are temporary too, we know that, but at least it's a more stable environment. And that's what I see missing, and that's what concerns me about this. And that's why the COC should be in here at the table, the county should be here. This is a partnership. And I sit there and I know those people's heart there, but money is an issue. It absolutely is a concern, and it's going to take money. Case management is going to take money. My daughter is a licensed clinical social worker. It takes money to hire those individuals to do that work. It is not cheap. I will tell you that. It is not. So I think we're missing an element of discussion, and that really is going to help make this even more successful. Yes, it's great. We can talk about the immediate need, but there's some things we should be really doing. This is a quick discussion, and I don't want this to be that quick that we overlook some really important pieces here. The other thing around this, and I hope we'll have the COC discussion, because I'm on that COC board, they're going to be wanting to know, why didn't you, Sharon, let us know what was going on? And I could only reach a few of them and show them this presentation quickly. And they were all quite shocked, to be very honest, quite shocked that they had not heard of this at all and were left out of this discussion. And I don't like it at all, Mr. City Manager. I do not like it. The other thing, this pallet company is the one that I found, Pallet Shelter Company. I guess it's a public benefit corporation. So I guess they're not in it to make money. But I see an opportunity here, if this is the way we're going, to create an internship process to help build these. They also have a mission of hiring, I think, as the city manager said, some homeless to help put them together, to help give them some type of employment. And I know there are other pieces that are already out there. I know Tiny Homes is doing something with Goodwill. They're building with Weaver. So there are partnerships out there. This could also be a partnership. Yes, they are a sole source company, but it's an opportunity. We don't need to miss that opportunity. We keep missing opportunity. Whether it's internship or mentor protege, we got college kids who would be, I know they would be interested. We keep talking about A&T, Bennett, Guilford College, Greensboro College. We keep missing out on those potential opportunities. And I would like to see that be done through, if this is the company that you're going to use, because this is what we should be about. here as well. So I would like for that to happen, Mr. City Manager.
So we do have three speakers, Mr. Scott Jones, Toad, and Emma Holland. And I don't know that we've missed these opportunities yet because there's still a pretty long lead time. This meeting came together fairly quickly, especially in light of the hurricane. We knew that these were going to be sought after by many different areas, and we just didn't want to lose the opportunity. So hopefully those partnerships will still be available. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Council, Madam Mayor, Scott Jones, Tiny House Community Development. I am like Sharon Hightower, Councilman Hightower, Councilman Lady Hightower. I'm pretty disturbed. I serve on the COC, the Guilford County Continuum of Care Board. I am the Housing Resource Committee Chair. And my charge is to find out what housing's being built, what housing's available in Greensboro, Guilford County. And it's sad. It's been said right up here, there is no housing available in Guilford County. And that's the truth. Michelle Kennedy, Cindy Blue, they all know this. What's disturbing is the COC was not a part of this conversation from the very beginning. The other thing, Pallet Shelter was formed in 2016. They only have less than 1,800 pallet houses in the United States, and majority, 80 or 90% of those are on the west coast of California only. There are none in Florida. There's only one area in Maine, one area, I think, in Chicago or something like that. So are they accustomed to colder climates like we have here in North Carolina? No, they are not. I am a certified state fire inspector. When I was in Burlington City Fire Department, I was a state certified inspector. These do not meet the building code for North Carolina as a builder developer. The definition of emergency. This is an emergency. We face this every year. We've had 6 months to prepare for this before this winter weather comes. What have we been doing for 6 months? Nothing. We've been waiting, and now we've come up with a solution that is not a viable solution for pallet houses. $700,000. Contract local hotels. Tammy, Ms. Thurham, you and I have talked about the need and the desire for people to stay in hotels around Wendover. Let's work in a collaborative effort with all of these hotels. Let's contract these hotel rooms. Let's put the everything in place to make it a successful program. Let's help these hotel owners and business owners with this money instead of buying pallet shelters that don't meet the North Carolina building code. I give it some time. This is too quick. This is a lot of money. Look, we feed breakfast every Saturday to 70 people. And I know I'm a pain in the rear for most of you. You don't like me. That's fine. I'm not here for that. I'm here because I love our friends experiencing homelessness. I don't get up with my wife when it's 13 degrees and snow on the ground to go out there and set up 2 griddles and serve a hot breakfast every Saturday morning. I do it for my love for these folks. That's why I do it. I don't have to do it. Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
questions?
Okay, I kept hearing you guys say you want to talk to the homeless community. I am homeless and I'm a professional homeless person. I do it because I like it, and that's the best way to help people on the streets. Sharon, you've been on fire. Zach, your questions today, you're not going to like the answers, but you were right on point. Pallet houses do not work. They do not. They never have. I mean, I'm here from Grand Rapids, Michigan. I originally was visiting because my family lives down here. I live in a tent in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We're talking like negative 20 degrees, 4 feet of snow on the ground. I can do this. Think about the pallets. They cannot sustain high winds at all. So anytime you get a storm, they're gone. You can actually insulate tents better than you can. You can, without using a generator. If you use a generator, very easy, quick fix. Bathrooms, porta potties. You guys are missing the easiest fix on that one. Porta potties. They're easily maintained. Yes, you're gonna get some graffiti, but paint over it. It's not that bad. about the census, getting how many of us are actually on the streets. You need to contract people like canvassers, come out to us rather than expecting us to go to the IRC, because we're spread out all over. And a lot of people don't like the IRC for various reasons. Let's see, as far as the parking, Walmart already does that. So if you guys want to just, have a couple lots around town where you basically police it, that's perfect. In terms of where you're going to spend this money, don't spend like, $750,000 on this shit. Oh crap, sorry. COC, you've got locals here. They know what they're doing. And as far as like, what time in the morning to get out, 9 a.m. is honestly the earliest, because you want to make sure that these places like the warming centers and everything, the library, are open before you send them out on the streets. That's how you keep them warm. And 10 cities is actually one of the easier ways for you guys to go. And I can help you with that. I'm an expert on it. Like I said, I've been doing this for the past 4 years in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And, I work with the HOT team, the homeless outreach team, because they love anagrams. Or, I mean, they love their But I work with them very closely, and I'm as an advisor, as someone that goes out and helps community. There are a lot easier solutions than the ones being proposed. So table all of this crap and let's get started.
My name's Emma Holland. I'm the street outreach and housing specialist at Tiny House Community Development. I wanted to speak on a couple of things, mainly street outreach. We're talking about how the unhoused community is spread out throughout Guilford County. We have street outreach teams that know what they're doing. They know how to put in data into HMIS. However, not just Tiny House, but every street outreach team is understaffed. We can't give you the numbers if we don't have the people to go out and find and connect people to services that they need. Secondly, I think, we're talking about this on October 10th. It's already cold outside. I mean, if you go outside at 2 a.m. and try to sit out there for 30 minutes, it's uncomfortable. I think we're doing this very late. Like Scott said, we had 6 months to talk about this. It's now an emergency because we waited. So we have this pallet idea that would have case management, and we're going to have RFPs. How long is that process going to take? Who are you going to put it out to? Is it going to be the COC, or are you going to select a couple that, you're comfortable with? If you want a long-term solution, we're working on a human services campus on Freeman Mill Road that would have workforce development. It would have places for people to meet with their case managers. It would have tiny house studios. It would be transitional housing for people in the workforce development. So you'd have people housed overnight. They'd have jobs, and then they wouldn't be in the public eye or in the way how people perceive them. I also agree with Councilwoman Hightower that the COC should have been aware of this. I learned about this last night, and as well as most of the COC members, which is a bit ridiculous since we are the experts, as you said. And then lastly, talking about giving surveys to the unhoused population, that's not the way to interact with the unhoused population. You need to go out there. You need to invite them in to have a conversation, not just answer your 3 questions, your 3 guided questions. You need to have a conversation. Also with service providers who are doing work every day, who are going out into the encampments that you want out of the way. Our opinions come from our interactions with the unhoused people. They don't come from our personal beliefs. So I think there are long-term solutions, and I think this was a very quick process that is now being called emergency, and it's not. It was something that could have been worked on years in advance, months in advance, and now at this point it's a little late to be doing all this. So thank you.
Michelle, I know that there's been a lot of talk about I know that we have the task force and that we talk with the county, but I'm wondering if there have been any discussions with the county and a partnership or.
So, I'm sorry. So over the last year, we've had exhaustive conversations with county leadership around potentials for partnership. As it relates to the COC, every RFP that our department ever puts out goes directly to the COC for distribution among all partner agencies. There comes a time, and I'm just speaking really frankly here, where we can continue to meet and plan the next meeting, or we can act. And we are at a place that we need to act. And unfortunately, the movement in terms of partnership will likely come as it relates to longer term solutions. There have been very little interest in immediate solutions that are actually moving forward. And you all know this, and I have to just say it. I've been doing this work for nearly 20 years, particularly this work. And the reality of the situation is there comes a time where you have to rip the Band-Aid off and do something. And that's what we're attempting to do. But it is not for lack of communication with the county either.
Were they aware of this project that we're looking at?
Not this particular project, no, other than to say we were investigating immediate solutions.
Maybe I can jump in there. Michelle is not aware of this, but I did engage in a very extensive conversation with the county manager about today's meeting on Friday. And I shared the presentation as well as the detailed questions. And he and I agreed that we can continue to have ongoing conversations about this. He did mention that they will not be able to be available to be here today because of other things that they have going, but he is very much aware of these proposals. And we said we will continue to engage in conversations around partnership, maybe not just on this, but on long-term solutions, which we both know we both need to work closely on this. But I will say that I agree with Michelle. The motivation for this is to get something going.
I am hopeful for long-term solutions with the county. I think the county is coming from a good place, and I'm pleased that the first time in a very long time that they are actually at the table with the city, wanting to be a partner in trying to find solutions for this. But I think we are in a position right now that we have to act. One thing that I've been a little frustrated about with the task force, and Sharon, you know, this started last winter when we had the question from people who were trying to find places in hotels in the winter, is that we've had very little action over the last 9 or 10 months. So I don't want to wait for action. I think we need to do something. You know, I understand that this solution was just identified in the last few weeks. I don't want to wait just to talk about it some more. We need to do something. This is not the end all solution. This is just a short-term solution. But we have to get people sheltered. And I don't want to risk having them sheltered so we can have another conversation about it.
And Madam Mayor, I just wanted to answer this related to hotel stays. If you recall, during COVID, we practiced a hotel stay option, and to accommodate about 85 people in a hotel stay it was right at 5 months, cost around $800,000. So that also is a pretty expensive proposition. And at the end of that, there's very little moving forward from it. So we have investigated everything that's available to us.
So Jamie?
I'd just like to add that as Michelle just said, you know, the hotel stay is the cash outlay over and over and over again every year. And it gives us no flexibility for emergency housing if somebody's house burns down, whatever, if we have another tornado and people can't live in their homes. This at least is an investment for future years. And something that we can use going forward if, heaven forbid, we have another tornado or something of that nature. This is not going to solve our problem. But it will keep us from spending the same $800,000 every year. And we've got to look at this as an investment. If we're looking at a lifespan of 10 years, then this is something that can help us year after year after year, that we don't have to repurchase next year. And as sad as it is to say, we are not going to have, come next winter, as much as I would like to have housing for all those experiencing homelessness, we're not going to have enough units next year either. And, you know, we can invest several $1 million between now and then, and we still likely won't have enough units. So again, I think this is a cash outlay. It's a big cash outlay this year. But I think we have to look at this amortized over a couple years for a couple years worth of hotel rooms. And we'll see that it's a long-term savings.
I
And
think
Councilwoman
that's a-
Thurn, to your point, over a 10-year period, the lifespan of these units, what you would save compared to a hotel spend on an annual basis is just under $8 million that we can be investing in housing options.
Well, and I think that is a really good point, because for the last 2 years, we have been talking about lost opportunities, that we have been spending money time and time again due to COVID in hotels and other things, which we could have invested in long-term, but we've been forced to do these short-term solutions because of living with the pandemic. But we have to look at those lost opportunity costs. And again, having this amortized over 10 years makes a big difference.
And I don't disagree, Madam Mayor, but I just want to say this, and I really do just want to say this. Yeah, you know, it's a quick solution, but not having the partners in the room with this discussion, is problematic for me, because it can be a collective solution. It's not just a centralized solution right here, but it is a countywide solution. If we're going to be partners with the county and be in the room, we bring solutions to that room. And I think that's how we just have to look at it. And the other thing I'll say, and then my buddy Hugh here has been looking at me funny. So, but I am concerned about the fire rating piece of it, because if there's a fire issue, then we're on a big, huge liability end. So we talk about cash now, there'll be cash later. And so we really need to make sure that that place is safe when you talk about housing individuals. So I would love to see fire ratings and all of that, those inspections and what that looks like. Thank you.
All right, so I think I've got Hugh, Goldie, Mary Kay, Tammy.
I thought it was Zach.
Oh, sorry, and Zach's in there.
I'm not, go ahead, Zach.
No, I just want to reiterate that what Sharon, Councilwoman Hightower just said is extremely important. We can all be so excited about this process, but if we get back that it's not going to be a safe thing, then we've all got juiced up about something that cannot be built in the state of North Carolina. And so that's a huge thing. And so before we pass on it, know that we're going to invest $780,000 in something that may or may not be able to happen. And the Regency Inn is still empty.
Well, I do believe they said they've spoken with staff and looked at these specs.
But she said they have not confirmed. There are some win ratings. They can't tell us what they are. There are specifications in which they could have, and having a hallway conversation is not like what our developers get to us. Y'all hear it all the time. How hard it is to build in the city of Greensboro. How zoning, no offense to planning and zoning, but they have nothing to do with technical review. They have nothing to do with fire.
Let's not get off. on
Just to
two
clarify
different-
that these are not buildings that are being constructed. This is an assembly process.
Which is a bigger problem on a heavy wind day. It's a bigger problem on a storm. And I've heard the word tornado and hurricane like 7 times this afternoon. And if we have one of those, this pallet place is gone. Just think about that, and let's get the specifications before we go diving in.
Well, I believe that staff is smart enough to look at the specifications before they place an order.
Thank you.
We will not
But
place.
before we vote on it, we need to have those specifications before an order is even thought about being placed.
We have Hugh, Goldie, Mary Kay, Tammy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess similar to the conversation we're into right now. You have one-dimensional things and you have multi-dimensional. This housing crisis is a multi-dimensional issue that needs to be addressed as such. This is but one piece, one temporary piece of the puzzle that I think would benefit if we had all the different pieces on the table, whether it's the hotel option, whether it's whatever it might be. And I just think that going from old finance background, you have short-term needs that you do short-term funding for, and you have long-term needs you do long-term funding for, and you don't mix the two, because once you start doing that, then you get yourself into trouble. This is a plea again for one, doing something, going big, but also presenting the whole picture. We need to see the whole puzzle so that we can make sure that we're putting short-term in the short-term bucket, long-term in the long-term bucket, but the beneficiaries are the residents of Greensboro, those who are homeless or who are facing homelessness. That's a fairly generic statement, but if we follow that plan, act with urgency, but also act with definition and strategy and intent, I think that's going to benefit us all.
Thank you. Dr. Wells, Mary Kay, Tammy.
I think going back when Michelle and the manager went to a meeting, and we knew you were going to some kind of meeting, I think they knew that they needed to look, because we've been talking about we need to do something about homelessness. So I'm assuming usually when you go to these big meetings and they have all of the vendors there, you ask them a million questions. And I hope you ask them a whole lot of questions about these these houses before, pop-up houses, before you even brought it to us. But we sat here last Monday night, and we heard all of the talk, and that's what kind of spurred this on. I really don't want to sit and listen for hours like we did Monday night for people talking about being homeless, and we have no solution. And I think it was you, Councilman Matheny, that asked for action. The staff moved into action, and now we hear a plan. And I think that we know it can't be everything right on time right now, because we don't have all of the answers, but we do have a vision. And the vision is that we would have a place for our homeless population to be safe and to be out of the streets, because that was the complaint. They're in the street and they're doing this and they're doing that, when we were trying to pass those ordinances the other night. So I know it sounds like it's a lot of money and you don't know all the answers, but I do think that we have a vision, and I'm just pleased that the staff moved quickly to bring about some kind of solution. And we know it might not be all in all, but we sit here night after night and we move items that are millions of dollars and think nothing of it. Move the item, thousands of dollars on the water department, on, and we think nothing about it. And here, these are lives that we're concerned about. So I'm totally in favor of us going forward with this. We don't have all of the answers, and we can always pick anything apart. As far as that continuum of care, that's something that we have to deal with. With them not being here today, if the manager talked to them and they knew about the meeting, and Scott was there and he knew about you knew about the meeting, why didn't the folks show up?
Well, I think the manager said he spoke with the county
The
manager.
county.
That's what I'm saying.
That's
Yeah,
not the
so-
continuum. That's not the continuum of care, Goldie.
Yeah, but if he
Get it right,
spoke
get it-
to the city, the county manager, it wasn't that they didn't know. Scott is on continuum of care, and what do? We tell each other, and you can show up. Nobody said it was a closed meeting. Now that's a whole new thing that we have to deal with, the continuum of care, because the HUD gives them money for homelessness.
They don't give them a
we
lot of money.
So we need to see about that, but that is not what should hold up our progress.
We still need to
Today.
enact with them.
And you can have the concern,
Well,
but we need to move forward with this. When we work on continuum of care, if we get the house, we've got to work on continuum of care for providing services. So that's something we can work on after today. But I think we need to move forward on this and all these things we throwing in, you know, to be, it's a stopgap and we need to move forward.
Help us, Lord.
It is Mary Kay, then Tammy.
Sorry you're having to stand there so long, Michelle, but you know, I said it earlier and I'm gonna say it again. We are always told you're not doing anything. You are not doing anything. What are you doing on council? You're not doing anything about our homeless situation. So yes, this is temporary. Our fire marshal is not going to put anyone in something that is unsafe. You know, Ty, our city manager, sent to us several weeks ago an idea about the pallet shelters. And here are the specifications. Resistant to mold, mildew, rot, and pests. 110 mile per hour wind rating. 25 pound per square foot snow load rating. Structural floor, durable framing, insulated walls, may be disassembled and assembled well over 40 times for flat storage or relocation. 10+ year material lifespan. So at least someone will not die on the city streets of Greensboro because we failed to make a decision today. We have people lying down in the streets and sidewalks of Greensboro because they have nowhere to go. I see people commenting with facial and their bodies in the audience. This is true, yes. So why are we turning away something that could at least get people off the streets? We could meet, the Continuum of Care could meet, we could have a meeting with the IRC, with Urban Ministry, we could have a meeting with Scott, we could have a meeting with everyone, and we're still not doing anything. I'm starting to get angry. We need to do something today. If this is not the answer, at least let us try it. We spend millions and millions of dollars, as Dr. Wells said, every single meeting. Let's at least say that we did something. Is it going to be the wrong thing? I don't know. I don't have a way to see the future. But I can sure darn say that if this passes, I'm going to go home tonight and say, at least I did a little something. And I guarantee you, most people in Greensboro would be glad that at least we did something. Is it the answer we need for a long term? No, of course not. But when I see people downtown shivering with their belongings in a shopping cart, we need to do something and we need to do it today.
Thank you. Mrs. Thurm?
I know what I'm going to say isn't popular, but I've got to say it. You know, I met in 2017 with the Continuum of Care about creating and getting their partnership into permanent supportive housing. I met with the Continuum of Care multiple times when we had a series of monthly meetings. Now, I know the people on the Continuum of Care now are different, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate all that you are doing. But quite frankly, I've been waiting 5 years for the Continuum of Care to do something, and they haven't done anything, and we haven't been able to count on them. I would love to have them at the table, and I know that there are new people on the Continuum of Care, and I look forward to working with those people. But if we waited for the Continuum of Care to take action, we will be here next winter waiting and having this same discussion again and again. I appreciate those of you that are new, that are on the Continuum of Care, that will help move us forward, because I have a lot of faith and confidence in you all that we can do that moving forward. The history has shown that it hasn't been that effective in the past. At this point, we need to take action. We need to make an investment. And for that reason, I am glad to move that we approve this, with the amendment that we approve these funds pending approval of the fire marshal and the TRC.
Okay, so that
Can I-
was
may I
moved and
just add a
seconded. I
comment,
know that
please?
Mrs. Hoffman has a quick.
And I'm certainly going to support this. You know, we are great at talking things to death. Great at it. But this is, you know, we're in the middle, we're in a crisis. This is an emergency situation. We're a short, you know, it's a short-term need, hopefully, as we, you know, take the next few years to work through permanent housing. But, you know, we just have to do this. I mean, it's not in the entire budget for the city of Greensboro. This is, you know, minuscule. And we can't wait for somebody else, and we can't keep talking about it. We just need to do this. And I agree with what the Tammy and Mary Kay, what you said, absolutely too. Sometimes you know, you just have to do it.
Mhm.
And we can't, you know, getting something done is better than getting it perfect.
And, you know, let me say, if we order a bunch of things that we can't use, if it turns out that we can't use these doorway shelters, then I would expect someone or some people would be fired over that. So I am going to say that based on that there is accountability for this, that we order them and we know they can be used. And if we can't, whoever used them should be looking for work elsewhere. Okay, that is my comment. And I know that we are working with the Housing Authority on the permanent supportive housing, and that it is important that we receive some of those vouchers, unused vouchers that will go towards the permanent supportive housing, that was part of the financial arrangement. So Mr. Cox, I'm glad you're here and that you will partner with us on helping the Regency Inn become a reality. This is not the only thing we're working on. There are other things we're working on as well. So we do have a motion. I believe it was moved.
And I have a question. No.
Okay. It was moved by Mrs. Thurm, seconded by a lot of people, Mrs. Hightower, and then we'll take the vote.
So let me say this. Yes, I'm on the continuum of care. And that's what it's there for. It's there. It's there permanently to be a continuum, the word of care. And when it blew up, let me just say the city of Greensboro was on that continuum of care. It's part of the reason why it blew up a few years ago. That's why I am there. That's why there are some new people there. To bring it back under control, because it was out of control at some point in time. It is a necessity to have it there. And they are a necessity to have them in the conversation around this issue. It is not a singular issue. And so that may be your opinion on it, but the reality is those individuals that sit in that space have degrees and certifications that everybody brags off of, certifications that our departments get, that would fill this room. And that is not to be lightly dismissed. And that is why that was my concern. And I think that we get to a place where we don't want people to even ask questions. I am not a go along to get along individual just because it makes somebody feel good. But it is prevalent upon us to ask those questions, particularly when we're doing something that's going to impact the district that I represent more than others, and need to know how that's going to be, because I'm going to get those questions, not you. So it is incumbent that I know these things ahead of time, not saying we can't do immediate solutions, but I am going to ask those questions, and I am there as part of the continuum of care, and I am going to make sure that space they're in the room and they are, I am speaking up for them.
And you're one of the people that gives me hope that the continuum of care will be effective now, unlike in the past. That's why I thanked those that are on the continuum of care now, because I believe you can be effective and you will be critical additions to the community. I didn't say that the continuum care was not necessary or that shouldn't be considered or any of that. What I said is the past history was not great. And I think many people will agree with that. As I said in my comments, Councilwoman Hightower, I'm very thankful that we have those new members on the council, on the continuum of care.
So
Call the
we,
question.
we have a motion by Mrs. Thurm. It was kind of duly seconded by Mary Kay and Goldie. So Madam Clerk, you pick. Seconded by Dr. Wells. Council, please vote. And we don't have the voting screen. Click your vote button. No, over here
Toggle from
on the desk, click
to
your
vote.
vote button. Has everybody voted? And that passes 7-1 with Mr. Matheny voting against. Now we need to stick around for a quick training session, especially. I want
Madam Mayor,
people
we
to
need a motion to adjourn this
Move to
meeting. please.
adjourn.
To adjourn. Well, we're actually, as a body, we still need to be
It had to be set up separately so we could
Okay.
set up a test
adjourn this,
meeting.
move, all in favor. Somebody
Move
move
it.
moved, seconded, all in favor to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now we are here for a brief training session. I do want people, one of the things that we need is for council members to know how to sign up to speak.
You're good to go.
Madam Clerk?
Madam Mayor, we are transitioning from the special meeting to the training session.
I know we are all under a really tight schedule right now. So there are two things that the council isn't utilizing, which is going to be very important. Part of it is I can't hear